Hey there, paper geeks and glitter nerds, it's Anna the Crazy Geek Crafter. I have been asked to make a video on how I make stencils, or have been making stencils. I am transiting into using my ScanNCut machine for cutting the stencils. Before I had the ScanNCut to use, I first tried out cutting the stencil plastic with scissors. It was not as effective as I had hoped, so I ventured into cutting it with a knife, and I'm going to tell you a bit about what you should look out for when you are using these two different mediums. I'm not going to show you how to do it. I think that's pretty easy to do. So here are my homemade stencils before I use my ScanNCut. This one I cut with a pair of scissors, and it's probably going to be hard to see, but the curves are uneven. I couldn't get the curves quite right with the scissors. Also, where every scallop meets, there's a bit of an overlap or a tear when I had to turn the scissors, and the same overlap occurred when I used my knife, which is the next stencil I'm gonna pick up here in the background with the flowers on it. I also had these tiny overlaps of the cutting, which sometimes can be seen when you use the stencil, so that's a problem. Now I put the tape on so that I always keep the same side up when I'm using the stencil and don't contaminate my project. Now this triangle I was planning to use for some Christmas cards. And these I made with dies. You can also use dies to make stencils. The troublesome thing is, and I don't know if you can really see it on camera, it makes an impression in the plastic, which in turn means when you use them, it doesn't give as a clearer distinction between the stenciled area and the non-stenciled area. But I am thinking maybe that can be solved by putting it back in the die cutting machine without anything else but the plates to try and flatten it out. Now I'm gonna show you how I made my cloud stencil. I actually just took some round shapes. In this case I'm just gonna use some dies in different sizes, and I just drew out a template on paper, and then I put the plastic on top and cut it with my knife or my scissors, depending on which version it is. And it's practically the same thing I'm gonna do with the digital one. I'm gonna show you that process as well a bit later. But in my opinion, this is the simplest way to make a stencil pattern. Now for the plastic material I use or have used for stencils, I started out with regular acetate, which is very thin, unfortunately. That's what my first stencils were made of. You can see here it's very flimsy. I'm trying to illustrate it. But this here is a laminator sheet inside another laminator sheet, which is far less flimsy and more durable, I hope. Since these are the first stencils I'm gonna make with it, I am still in the trial and error phase. But when it comes to structure, I think they're better than normal acetate, like this one, you know, and then this one. You can buy plastic like the ones used for Scoreboard stencils, but I haven't really wanted to fork out the money yet. If this works, why should I? Let's see what happens. So I'm going to need a few measurements for my digital files, so I can use as much of this acetate, or not acetate, plastic if you will, as possible. And I have quite a few sheets, so I am looking forward to trying out a few different designs. Let's go to the computer. I'm going to be using the Brother Canvas program. I have already made a square in the background, which is the size I can actually make my stencil. And now I am going to, so to speak, duplicate what I did with my dies on paper, making different circles, and in the end it will look like a cloud border. So I'm just gonna keep on working. What I'm actually doing is holding the key called Alt or Alternative, and And when I drag on a shape while I'm holding this key, it will duplicate it. This makes for far faster working than going back to the circle on the side and clicking that one. So when I have all my circles, I weld them. And now I have to cut the upper part into the rectangle. I'm just gonna make a copy of it since I want to keep my rectangle. I'm gonna look at how far out I can place my row of circles. And I'm gonna fumble a bit. I can't always remember which command is the best to use, but I get in the end I actually forgot how I did that. Well, no matter. And I wanted another one on the bottom where the clouds were bigger. You might as well use both sides of this, right? I do move the circles up a bit so I have more space. That means I'm actually getting 3 stencils out of this at once. Since the negative part of the clouds are actually waves. Very nice. Now I caught what I was actually doing. The first thing I do was to divide, and then I moved the part with the curve I wanted up a few pixels, and then I welded it to the rectangle. Then I could delete all the unnecessary parts. I've cut out my stencils. Here are the ones I've made. Like you see, the clouds, this is the waves. So I'm just gonna give you a quick preview of how it would look. I'm just using regular copy paper, so it's not gonna be as pretty as if I was using Bristol or something like that. Now I made them pretty long. That means I can actually use these on slimline cards, which is phenomenal because I love slimline cards. Whether you decide to use your machine or cut your stencil by hand, I would say that most shapes are doable. It takes time and patience, but there isn't much you can't make yourself if you really want to. Now, the other 2 stencils I've made, I'm gonna show you in a different video. It's gonna air about 15 minutes after this one, so if you're a bit late, they'll both be ready for you. If not, why don't you go get a glass of water, cup of coffee, whatever your desire is, and then watch what other things I have been doing with stencil this week. And if you're just here for the how-to, then I hope you'll be having a good day, evening or night.